recorded, so you are deemed to have consented to being recorded whilst the meeting is running. As soon as the meeting stops, camera stop. That's the way the government rules work these days on these things, which seems perfectly fair and equitable. So welcome everyone to this evening's Council Cabinet meeting. We've got a fairly heavy agenda by our standards this evening. It was quite chunky business, so we'll go through whatever speed deems appropriate based on what people have to say at different times. So I'd certainly welcome those visitors here who are not here too often, whether that be councillors or members of the public. If you want to participate in an item, I'm very lax on these things. I tend to let people contribute. So even if you haven't indicated you want to speak on something, if you like wave furiously, as long as my fairly weak, distant vision can pick you out, because you are a long way away from me. I just about recognise James Dugan in the front row. Beyond that, I haven't got a clue who's here. So if you want to wave furiously, if you want to contribute, then feel free to do so, and we'll try and bring you in. We'll do that at the start of each item, not halfway through each item, in the same way that our local area committees work with public contributions and guest council contributions at the start of the item. So just like local area committees, this is a meeting in public, not a meeting. So it's primarily a meeting for the council to take decisions through its cabinet system, and we will go through some items quicker than others if it's clear there's a straightforward consensus. So to kick off with, we have apologies which we have in advance from Cllr, who's unwell. Derek pretty formally sends apologies, but by the wonders of modern science, Derek is watching us from his screen at home, and in theory he can participate too if he so wishes to. He's going to have to wave very furiously. His agenda is a long way away from here. Secondly, we'll take declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest they want to cause? I think we have. So we can go to minutes of the last meeting on the 21st of September. What's the grace from those? If not, we will approve them as circulated. That takes us to public participation. We had a very lengthy and very interesting letter from a resident in Easley called David Lang, who did say he couldn't make it this evening, did want his letter to be considered. It would actually take far too long to read out, probably longer than the rest of the meeting. So what we said to David is we will get the full record of the issues that he's interested in. Most of them in practice really were area committee issues relevant to Eastern North area committees, so but I'll be picked up there. And if you want to follow up, I'm expecting Tonia on Eastern North area committee. So there we are. I've got no one else listed wanting to speak in the public participation section, which is on things that are not otherwise listed on the agenda. No one is waving furious. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take item 7 next, strategic land from Bishopslow, because my sense is that there are more people in the public gallery who are not staff who are interested in that item than are interested in the other items on the agenda tonight, even though they might well be interested in the items. That's the one that seems like most interesting. So I'm going to briefly introduce the paper, and then we'll take those who want to contribute. I know that Jim Tidridge wants to contribute. You're very welcome to Jim. This paper is the first in a series of papers related to the Council's strategic land acquisitions. Some time back, the Council acquired many hundreds of acres of farmland around the borough for environmental mitigation. And the purpose of that was to be able to offset, as part of the government's nitrate schemes and phosphate mitigation for development taking place elsewhere in the borough, and for other good sound environmental reasons. There was never at that stage any intention to do much else with any of this land other than use it for environmental mitigation. But it became quite clear with a couple of the sites, most particularly Stoke Park Farm in Bishopslow, that there's more potential to the site of the land than simply locking it up for environmental mitigation with no access to the public beyond the existing public rights of way. So what we did was we asked our strategic land manager to just sketch out a few ideas, literally sketch out a few ideas, because what local government sometimes doesn't do very well is local government often goes away, employs consultants, and dreams up vastly complicated schemes, publishes them for consultation, and really what they're doing is saying this is what we're going to do. We're not doing that. This is exactly the reverse. And I made a commitment to the local ward councillor some time ago, and this is honouring that commitment. But we will publish something very simple in draft, then we'll open it up to totally open public participation for stakeholders like parish councils, the area committee, anyone else who's got any interest at all. We've already had some really positive feedback with some quite useful questions from residents in the Cllr Drive area in particular, which is exactly the kind of thing we want to get feedback on. And the idea is that once we have gone through this evening's meeting, I'm hoping therefore we don't spend a great deal of time discussing the detail on this evening because there really isn't any point. all the stakeholders doing is publishing something to just get people to think and feedback. We will then do a lengthy public consultation just on what we're publishing, with the invitation to anyone to say anything they like about anything to do with that land, whether we've got some ideas right, whether we've got some ideas wrong, whether we should do more of some things, less of something else, whatever it happens to be. And then that consultation in itself lasts for the best part of 3 months, so plenty of time for people to have thoughts, and then we'll consider all the issues that are raised, and we'll take it back to the systems, which will include the area committee having a crack at it separately before it comes back here to Cabinet or do anything at all. My guess is that whole process is probably a 9-month process, because it's a major site acquisition that we've taken in some time back, and we want to make sure we get it right. Some of the early thoughts we've got are clearly already in paper in terms of opening up some land to the public, protecting some land to the public, protecting the fishery business, which has gone significant investment in recent times. And Ian Corben, Tim Groves, and I went out to the site and took a look at it and had some conversations there with the fishery owners. Very impressed with World Tour along the way. But it did get us thinking about lots of other things that were potential around the site, including making better use of redundant buildings, which are on the old farm site. And how we could do that, that raised all sorts of questions again in terms of amount of access, given that the main access route to the site at the moment is through a sewer drive, which is not adopted. And again, issue after issue after issue. But the consultation paper will just throw this open for people to give us some thoughts, and we'll see where that goes. But Jim, you said you wanted to contribute now in the site. Could you start with the microphone, and we'll see whether our technology works. Okay. For those not sure, Vintage just the Ward Council, one of the Ward Councillors.
I am, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, much appreciated. I just would like to remind Cabinet members of some views already expressed and motions already passed by both the Bicknell Local Area Committee and Bishopstoke Parish Council, which I'm sure you're all very aware of, but that doesn't hurt to remind. On the 9th of March this year, the following motion was passed unanimously by the Bicknell LAC. This committee actively promotes and champions the establishment of a local nature reserve and land being purchased at Stoke Park 1 to ensure the site contains a diverse range of habitats, that nitrates and other environmentally harmful impacts from its previous use are eliminated, and that it remains a special place for wildlife, nature, and the people of Bishopstoke, Barrow, and Horton Heath, and indeed across the borough in perpetuity. Present were many members of the public, some of whom spoke. On 27th of October, Bishopstoke Parish Council passed a motion to write to EBC to express support for transforming the farm into a nature reserve. I'd like to stress that at both these meetings, the respective motions were passed unanimously, with cross-party support. Indeed, Parish Councillor Mark Thornton was very clear that he did not want to see development of the land in any way that would compromise its value to wildlife and nature. It's really great to hear. I welcome this consultation, as will Bishopstoke Parish Council and many local residents. Transforming the former farm into an invaluable natural asset represents a major opportunity for this council to lead and set an example of ecological stewardship. The nature reserve would be the clearest to demonstrate direction of travel. And this could over a plan of years that works practically as well as with many local residents and stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay. One thing we should have added within is that whatever we do as a council and in partnership with whoever we're in partnership with, it's not always so financially, because we know that straitened economic times that we are currently living in, we might come to that later in terms of this evening, there has to be a business case to make things happen. We will obviously want to look at all the environmental issues that are raised from the consultation, and that will inform hopefully a considered debate, and hopefully then a clear conclusion that everyone signs up to in terms of future land uses. But that's a long way in the future yet. So that's all very helpful. Does anyone else around the table want to speak on this item? Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I certainly encourage, and I hope we would be able to organise some more things, because that would be really, really useful. We walked the site, and it's clearly an area of land which hasn't been open to the public for a very long time. I think it's given an opportunity to do so, and I think doing this early doors really gives you and everyone a really good and clear opportunity to put views forward. And I think from our point of view, we see a number of fantastic opportunities, but there are constraints as well. And as Keith says, from a viability point of view, everything needs to add up. The conversation and the meeting that we had at the fisheries, hopefully, I don't know if you've been to the fisheries, but if Rory can remember for Rory to include the fishery, and if you can go down and see that if you haven't already, well worth doing if that's of interest. But,
not expressing interest because it's neighbours that run it. So
thank you very much.
Thank you much, Ian. And one of only 2 or 3 significant exporters of ornamental fish in the country along the way, which is kind of surprising. I was expecting kind of like fishery, as opposed to pretty fishes fishery, or things like that big fishery, millions and millions. All right, good stuff. Anybody else? So the recommendation in front of us is effectively to just kick off public consultation, and we'll just see where that goes. And no one knows. That's sometimes the beauty of it. So thank you, colleagues, for that. Thank you, Jim, for coming along too. We'll then move on to the medium-term financial plan. And this is clearly far the biggest item on this evening's agenda. We have, as a council, over many years, taken a very prudent approach to financial management, because that's the most important thing we can do as a council, is to steward public money to the best of our ability. As a result of that, we not only been able to protect services over many years, when the last decade, most councils have been cutting services right the way down to the bone, to removing discretionary services. And we see it all over the place, regardless of fiscal control. We have been able to avoid doing that over the course of the last 10 years. And that's primarily because, firstly, we have had strong financial management. We talked to my left here this evening, others, but also because of our investments in commercial property, which produces good economic returns for the council over many years, to the tune of, on average, about £10 to £12 million a year net of our interest costs, which has contributed amazingly to the protection of public services. We, unlike many councils, we decided not to spend one-off grants from government that came in as capital. The new homes bonus, all those funds that many councils took to their revenue budgets, to balance their revenue budgets. We took a view right at the start we wouldn't do that because we recognised that big government would be turning up at some point, because governments tend to do that. That's true almost any government. But that means that we've got because of those investments, in fact, we've built up a long-term interest rate reserve on the basis of banking money to the level at which we expect interest rates to genuinely be at the time, as opposed to the interest we were paying. A significant interest rate reserve, which is going to give us an additional buffer that many councils haven't got. What's happened, of course, during the course of this year took many people by surprise. We go back to when we set our budget in February. Our Treasury Management advisors are in close to advise most councils around the country. We're still projecting long-term interest rates close to the floor. And projecting that although inflation would rise a little, it would only rise a little. We were already seeing at that point, those of you remember back into January and February, a few odd food shortages, with some empty supermarket shelves and some things just not appearing when they should be, mainly due to logistics delays around Brexit, around the Channel Tunnel and elsewhere. But some things there that were beginning already to create a tick up in inflation. What we have, of course, since then, as a result of Russia's illegal war and the overall management of the economy, as the inflation has rocketed, energy prices have gone through the roof. Just in terms of even dealing with pay issues, to make sure that we as a council cope with the national minimum wage, and we as a living wage employer rather than just a minimum wage employer, very, very significant extra costs as a result of inflation in pay. And then in the course of the last few weeks, mainly as a result of the government's new budget, the economic disaster of the government's new budget, inflation rates going way above where they were expected by markets some time ago. The consequence for all that is that we're going to have to pause some significant amount of spending for a couple of years until the financial situation stabilises. Our underlying financial picture is still incredibly healthy, if we look at average long-term interest rates and the typical trend rates for inflation. So as soon as we get back to those positions, we will be again in a very strong financial position. And again, we're still probably in a better position than many councils already, based on our investments, our interest rate reserves, and our prudential approach to financial management. What that creates is what you could call a lump of extra money being defined over the course of the next couple of years, whilst inflation is high, whilst interest rates are high. If you plot it as a curve, I think paragraph 19 or 20 or something like that in the report gives an illustration of some of this. We need to find that money that's in that fund. And the only way we can find that money in that fund is by either increasing income or reducing expenditure or both. So that is what we're going to have to do. That won't be easy. We are therefore having to go through the same process that most councils have gone through over the course of the last decade. And it's we used to go through as a council back in the 1990s and early 2000s of making some budget reductions alongside finding ways of creating extra income to balance the books over that period. So that is the task that we as Cabinet have set the management team. James and the team have been working very hard over the last few weeks, working through some of the consequences of that. Sadly, that does mean that there will be some services that we will have to pause over the course of the next couple of years. Some cases may be longer. We'll also make some genuine efficiencies. We will reduce some of our staff headcount, particularly around senior management. It's right that we prioritise protecting services as much as possibly can. And the inevitable consequence of that is that our staff headcount will dip a little bit over the course of the next couple of years. That's not somewhere we expected to be a few months ago. It's not somewhere that any council expected to be a few months ago, but it's a simple reality of where we are right now. So spinning the ship is the sort of metaphor that we're at. This is not that unusual situation across local government as a whole. It's just that we're not used to having to do it because of the way we've managed the council over the course of so many years. So the paper here does contain some quite tough targets that we need to meet. The quicker we meet those targets, the quicker we'll be able to deal with that lump of cash that we need to find and give protection of public services. It means that we will have to slow down some capital projects, but we will be starting fewer capital projects. But it also means that in other areas we'll actually need to do more because it's about generating additional revenue for the council. So there'll be some areas around our estate where we're making better use of the assets that we've got, through letting space in this building, for example, through accelerating housing projects that actually involves more cost, because that cost creates more income over the short, medium, and longer term. So that's the paper that's in front of us this evening. Sarah, what have I missed that needs to be added to that before we open up this debate?
To be fair, I think you've covered every point that we've picked up. Yeah, so it's unfortunate we have to bring the paper, but I think it's really important to note that this paper is putting the figures together very quickly based on a very fluid national situation, which is changing by the day, as we know, and it is the most prudent picture. So if things improve economically, then things will improve. But yeah, I think it is the point that these targets, which we had anyway in the budget, are slightly bigger, but brought forward. And I think the team worked really hard to fill that budget gap, and we just have to deliver on those efficiency targets that we've set.
Thank you, Sarah. So it is going to take at least a year, possibly longer, depending on the confidence of government to get inflation down. It's going to take that long or a bit longer to get interest rates back down to their long-term trend. We ought to be able to get there. What we have seen, of course, over the course of the last few weeks is some quite amazing decisions nationally, which have unsettled the financial markets to an extent that I don't think any of us have seen in any of our lifetimes before. Hopefully, we'll have to see again. But the upside is that we have already seen as a result of some of the changes in key people in government that have already happened and are happening now, a little bit of stabilisation in some of these markets already. So maybe the trend is starting to pull back. No one's waving at me from the public gallery at the moment. Colleagues around the table, any council want to add anything to what's been said or to the paper that's been circulated? Yeah.
I think it's really balanced paper, Chair. Our first share. I know we've had discussions. It's clearly not a conversation that we wanted to have, that we thought we would have. I know the finance team worked very hard to pull this together over a short space of time. I think just to emphasise really Chair's comments, this is a council which has a long history of prudency, and that's doubly not shocking, but doubly the unfortunate situation of having to actually do what we're doing, because we do run a tight ship and we have always run a tight ship, and external factors have clearly had a major effect here. The zombie government of the summer following the ineffectual government over the last 12 months has clearly affected external markets to a great degree. And I'm afraid we are having to make adjustments for that. But we are doing it very quickly. I know that's one of the points that I know we've spoken about internally, that it was important to get this on the table quickly so that we can start the process to steady the ship, as Keith said. So in terms of the paper, as Keith has already said, various reductions have to be seen, and they are all regrettable. Having said that, I know that it's going to be dealt with properly, particularly from the staff point of view, and that is certainly something that we would want to happen. As with all of these things, if anyone has any ideas, please do come forward. I know staff in particular have been asked to think of extra things that either we do that we should stop, or that we don't do that we should start to increase. So I think it's a very balanced paper, and see where it goes.
Thanks very much, Ian. I think the point on staff ideas is one that's already been picked up, and I know that I think James is going to be putting out a message to staff again tomorrow, which will again already pick up on some of those ideas that we're saying before. Some of those are about income generation, some of those are about savings, and they all help the bottom line. And the more of those that we can pick up, the better we're able to protect our services and also retain as many of our staff as we possibly can. I mean, the staff issues here are not ones we want to take, but they still are very, very modest compared to a lot of the issues that most other councils face. When you see some of the headlines in the press around some of the issues that county and unitary councils have to deal with, or one or two district councils as well, it talks about vast numbers of staff exiting the organisation. That is not the position we're in here. Fortunately, I hope very much that we can protect the vast majority of staff and manage a change where most of us through things like early retirements and voluntary changes. Cool.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that's been said by yourself and Ian. And obviously, it's very regrettable that we have to do this. It's actually disappointing as well, because we're a sort of hostage to fortune. It hasn't been our own fault that this has actually been sort of placed upon us by all the things that Ian said. But we've acted quickly, we've acted decisively. We haven't kicked the can down the road, and we haven't tried to hide away from it and duck the issue. As a council, we've been very open. We've been with the public, and more importantly, with our staff. We've also been very honest, and both of those things are potentially honesty and openness are perhaps something that central government can actually learn from recent things that have been going on. So the action report, I think, is a very prudent, it's a very sensible report, and I agree with it and support it, and hopefully it's worst case scenario, and that October the 30th or 31st or whenever it may be now doesn't actually throw up any other grenades to add to the woes, so we have a sort of consistent picture going forward, and stability, which is what has put this council in such a strong position to actually deal with this now, is the prudent financial management that the council's had, and the stability because of that, which enables us to be able to do what we're doing, and Sarah and Andy and the team to punch numbers and the staff that are feeding in more happily. So the only thing I'll add is it's thanks to all the staff that are working very hard to make this as smooth as possible, and all the other staff around the whole council that are feeding in ideas, from James right the way down to you know, the newest member of staff who's joined the council. And that's, yeah.
Thanks so much. Well, you raised a good point around government and future changes in government. We know that the new Chancellor said in his first speech that all departments were going to be asked to find additional savings, which for local government is going to be particularly tough. Local government has been the bit of public sector has been whipped the hardest by austerity over the course of the last 12 years. If you look at the savings that local government have made compared to most of the departments, some were protected either cash or inflation levels, like health, education, goes to the next extent, defence. We have lost collectively about 30% of our income in local government during the course of the last 12 years, as well as having to pick up a lot of extra unfunded burdens. The Local Government Association International estimates the unfunded additional burdens that's come out of local government in the last couple of years at over £2 billion, which is a lot of money. So if the government, in its autumn statement at the end of this month, is going to make further cuts to local government, then those are going to, some of those pressures will bear down on us as well. We in some ways are protected more than most because we don't get grants anymore from government. So they can't cut our grants. They already cut it by removing it. But there are discretionary bits of money that sometimes come to district councils. You could easily see that some of those won't come at a lower level, or there'll be additional new burdens. Like we know the payment is going to go up in this inflation, and the audit fees are going to go up dramatically over the course of the next year or so. And that's going to come from somewhere. And those changes are because the government has changed the rules, how these things have to happen, and we're the ones who got the pieces. So the same applies to every other district council and unitary council around the country as well. Derek Pretty's hands up in Hedge End. I can see a little yellow flag waving. Let's just see whether we can get your microphone working, Derek, and you can make a contribution.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's been a bit muffled, the discussion, but I'm happy to support this because I think we've demonstrated yet again that as a council, we're quick to recognise when things need to change and when we need to adapt our way of working. Circumstances are nationally, internationally very difficult. And I think now we're demonstrating the fact that we take everything so seriously that we made provision for interest rate reserves and so on and so forth. But everybody in the country is going to need to look at ways of savings and increasing their income. And I think what we're presented with this evening is excellent. We've sat through it several times, and I like everybody, one has reservations, but I think what we've got here is a well thought through document, and I'm more than happy to. I can't vote, I know, but I would be happy to support it if I was there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. Yeah, you're here virtually, even though you can't formally report it as being in attendance for meeting purposes because of the way the government used to take local government's request without remote attendance forward. Anybody else? No? Okay, in which case, I think from the tone of the discussion that colleagues are content to support the recommendations here. Just again, in conclusion, I mean, this is not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy for councils. It's certainly not going to be easy for staff. We have made a commitment to staff that when we stop doing something, we're not going to expect that to be picked up by other staff. So we're cutting the workload as well as the actual either services or level of funding that's going into the individual areas. And detailed proposals will work through my staff over the course of the coming weeks, where they have a significant implication. The more reform going back to here, I suspect the vast majority will be able to deal with in terms of that. Okay, if we'll take the conclusions there as agreed, we can move on to item 8, domestic waste and recycling. Rubicon will be waxing lyrical in this paper, but you can be spared that because it's not waxing lyrical at all at the moment because you can't speak. This is minor tweaks and updates to the existing council domestic waste and recycling policy. There's nothing to scare the horses here, so I'm hoping that colleagues are just happy to agree this unless anyone wants to raise anything. No? Okay, we'll take that as agreed. Corporate service monitoring, item 9 on the agenda, again has been circulated. Everyone already has all that information. I don't think, again, there's any surprises here, but we'll provoke any questions. If there are, now is the time to release them. I don't think there is, so we'll take those as agreed. That moves us to our exempt business item, which for those who don't follow these things, will have to say to the press and the public if they're in attendance, they need to leave the room because we're just discussing something which is commercially sensitive. I don't think, looking around the room, that there's any press or public here who are not staff or councillors. So I think that means everyone is welcome to stay if they so wish. On to item 11, which is a property item. Property item is one of those income generating